It really was a crushing defeat, a gut punch, whatever you want to call it. And I think at the end of the day, Coach Lowry's quote is right on the money. I mean, it's all about, you know, getting prepared, playing well, executing, but you have to finish. And that was the concern going into the TCU game, the Texas Tech game. And that's why you felt so good about it, honestly, because they not only finished the game, like in the last couple of 2 or 3 minutes, they finished the game in a big way with the way they played in the entirety of the second half. I mean, you think about the ball three, all of the mistakes that K-State made down the stretch against TCU, and then how well they played in the game on Saturday. I mean, they outscored Texas Tech 36-23 in the second half and held a pretty darn good offensive team to basically, I mean, what was it? They shot in the second half 8 of 24. That's just over 33%. That's outstanding.
Yeah, it wasn't like K-State wasn't playing good defense in this TCU game. I mean, for goodness sake, Marquise Noel, a great week he had, but it started with 7 steals against the Horned Frogs, and he scores 18 points. But it was just the offense wasn't backing up the defense. It was a low-scoring game. And also, this has been a conversation throughout the week last week. I was speaking with multiple guests about this. You know, for some, it was like, you know, the last couple of minutes. That's what really did in K-State. That's why K-State didn't win the game. They had multiple chances to do it. But also, I kind of look at the free throw shooting and how uncharacteristic it was for K-State to go 11 for 22 from the free throw line, Wyatt.
That's a really good point, too. I think you can look at any of the numbers that you want to, but, I mean, if you'd have said to me as an example before the Texas Tech game, K-State would be 5 of 7 at the free throw line, I'm going, that's not enough. They get beat. So it kind of shows you there are a lot of factors that go in. One thing that I think that I should say here, too, in talking about late-game situations, one of the differences that not a lot of people have talked about, Mitch, from the Wednesday game to the Saturday game was really when the game was there to be taken and or lost. If you noticed, K-State went really small on Saturday. There was really no Casey Ezeagu to be found. There was no Davion Bradford to be found. They were playing Ish Massoud at the 5, went small. They were better defensively. They were better offensively. And I think that was a factor. I don't know if they'll do that a lot going forward. I think they will do it some, certainly. But to me, that was an overlooked thing by some people, and not by me. I thought that was one of the keys to the game.
Yeah, back-to-back games. Ish Massoud, he comes off the bench, and you're not seeing him shoot the ball too much anymore. He was 1 for 3 against Texas Tech, and he's 1 for 2 against TCU. So he's been really quiet lately. But you're right, going small ball lineup lately with Selton Miguel in the starting lineup. But both games, you saw your heavy hitters kind of lead the way. It was Nigel Pack, who goes for 10 points against TCU, but then comes up real big. And against Texas Tech, he puts up 14 big points. He hits a couple of triples, which he wasn't really hot. Like K-State shooting the ball, like never got flaming hot. It was just putting a couple of shots together in a row and defense turning into some pretty decent offense. But I guess my question to you is, Wyatt, I mean, do you see this now going to be a continuing thing where K-State is going to continue to go more small ball and maybe continue to limit the minutes a little bit with the bigs?
Well, I think it just I don't want to be a fence rider in any way, but I think it kind of depends on the big. They've got to get this thing figured out with Davion Bradford and get him playing at a higher level. I think Casey Ezeagu is what he is. I mean, he's going to be for you a 15 to 20-minute a game guy, whether it's in a starting role or off the bench. He's going to play with high energy. He's going to defend. He's going to rebound. He will not be that big a scorer. They've got many other options, so I think that's what it is. Davion's a little bit different of a story for me because he's 7 foot and 255 pounds. And if you go back to the way he played in the last 15 games of last year, if they can find that Davion Bradford, then I think everything is on the table. If they can't, and he plays the rest of this year like he has to this point, then I think you're right. I think you're going to go a little bit smaller a lot of the times, whether it hurts you on the defensive end sometimes or not. One thing that you mentioned there, too, that I think should be talked about a little bit, too, is as we went into the game with Texas Tech, I can't describe to you how it was parlayed to the team. You better move the ball against these guys. If you don't make that extra pass and get the ball moved from side to side and have some paint touches, it's going to be a long day. And I think for whatever reason that illuminated with them, if that's the right way to say it. And I thought their ball movement was much, much, much better. I thought their shot selection was much better. We saw, as an example, Ish Massoud pass up some shots. Not all, but some. We've seen in the last few games, too, Selton Miguel, who has struggled this year from three, kind of back off on that and just try to be more of a pull-up jump shooter or driver, more times than not a driver. So I think my point is that we've seen different things in just 2 games this week affect this team either adversely or in a good way. And I think maybe they're still kind of figuring themselves out, Mitch. Maybe you see it that way, maybe you don't, but that's the way I'm seeing it.
Well, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, there's no just going small ball with the lineups the last couple of games. That's like you brought up earlier, that's a great sign of just them still trying to figure things out. What's the best case scenario? How does K-State, what's the best lineup to put up points on the board and create best defense? Bruce Weber said it after the TCU game. They made that starting lineup because they thought that was their best defensive lineup, and it was the same thing for Texas Tech, where K-State, they hold the Red Raiders to some of their worst numbers over the entire season so far. Texas Tech only scores 51 points, second worst this year, and also, K-State, if you look at Texas Tech's numbers, was really good defensively by holding the Red Raiders to 23.5% from three-point range. Mm-hmm. Now, Texas Tech did play 4 games in 8 days. I'm not exactly the one that always buys into that. Some teams have to go through rougher stretches, and they're still able to get through that. But this is also the Big 12, and it's a tough league. Is there kind of an asterisk next to this game because Texas Tech played 4 out of 8? Or is this, hey, K-State was finally due. They took down a top 25 team. They were that close. It shouldn't be a shocker that K-State was able to pull one out like this.
It's a fantastic question. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think K-State improvement. But even Bruce Weber, when he came down for postgame with Stan and I Saturday and sat in the chair, we were coming out of a break. And one of the first things out of his mouth was that, we caught them at a good time where maybe they were a little bit tired. And that's probably a fair statement. They really do hang their hat on defense, but they're also a really pretty quality offensive team when things are going right for them. I thought K-State gave up quite a bit to Bryson Williams, but that's his abilities to be able to play inside and out. He's really kind of a taller 3-man or probably a stretch 4, playing a lot of 5 for them. And I really appreciate, what he has given up to make their team better. I think the 4 games in that kind of a stretch was a factor, and you just have to be a man and admit that. It's just what it is.
I tell you what, the athleticism from Bryson Williams, I don't think I've been more impressed by an opposing player than him so far this year. His move to the bucket, there was a couple of times he got around Davion Bradford. I was like, man, that guy is just extremely athletic for a big man who played 33 minutes. He was 9 of 15 from the floor, and he finished with 20 points. But if you also look at who's the top scorers for this team, Terrence Shannon and Kevin McCullough. McCullough goes for 6 points, and Terrence Shannon has 2 points. And Shannon, he was coming back from injury. He's dealing with a back thing, and he played 18 minutes. But McCullough played 34 minutes, and Coach Adams was just rotating guys like crazy. The lineup was different every 30 seconds, it felt like. But for K-State to keep McCullough and Shannon, I would imagine you look at that as just a giant factor, holding them to a combined 8 points.
Oh, you have to. And again, I think there is an asterisk there because of the Terrence Shannon injury. It's difficult. Mitch, you know this. He had only played in 6 games, and it had been a while. Had back spasms, and heck, when back spasms are a pain, even if you're not playing basketball. Think about trying to play basketball with that. But I thought he got into foul trouble, which affected him a little bit. But let's talk about Kevin McCullough. This is a kid that I think all of our fans know that Bruce Weber spent a lot of time recruiting, and when you watch him, you can understand why. Our coaches like to say he's the head of the snake, meaning he's the leader of the group. And he's not a point guard, but he's playing point guard. He's 6'6". He can switch and play on anybody, as can really all of their guys. I think they're a really good team. And again, I think K-State played great. Don't get me wrong. But I think they did benefit from that stretch that we talked about. But they also really, you talked about the rotations. They did that in part because of all of the games, but in part because that's kind of what they are. I think looking back and studying for the game, I think Bryson Williams was their biggest guy in number of minutes, and he was at about 27 minutes a game. So, I mean, most everybody has at least one or two guys playing 30 to 35 to 36 minutes, but not them. And that shows you, how many of those kids are cut in and how hard they play and how talented they are.
A couple of notes on that win against number 19 Texas Tech. Again, that final score 62-51. We got sandstorm. We had a really fun environment at Bramlage Coliseum it was 11 a.m. tip-off. Just one of those usual 11 a.m. games for K-State and Texas Tech, either basketball or football. But that is K-State's first win this year against a top 25 opponent. K-State has now beaten a top 25 opponent every year since the 06-07 season. And for head coach Bruce Weber, his 100th victory for K-State when holding an opponent under 60 points. Bruce Weber holding a team under 60 is now 110 in his tenure. So Marquise Noel back on earlier last week, the midweek game. I forget the day of the week, whatever it was, but K-State falling to TCU 60-57. But Marquise Noel, he shot the ball pretty well. 7 of 12, 18 points, 4 assists, and 7 steals, which tied a program record in a conference game. Meanwhile, the game Saturday, you think if K-State has a chance to win, you need double digits from Marquise Noel. You need him shooting the basketball, hitting a couple of tough threes. That's a guy that can knock down those tough shots. And with how good Texas Tech is, that's a tough defensive team. You're gonna face those kind of shots, no doubt about it. Well, Marquise Noel, after the under 16 timeout, really wasn't a scoring threat. He had 5 points at that point. And then after that, he never hit a field goal for the rest of the game. He had 2 free throws that he made to total 7 points. But, man, was he finding open shooters. He had 9 assists in the game. It was either from three-point range. He had a great find to Selton Miguel in the paint late in the game, and also 5 steals. Marquise Noel, we know he is special, and he's going to have to be big for K-State in this next stretch here for the rest of the season. But looking back at these 2 games, he was, no doubt about it, one of the absolute best contributors for K-State last week to give K-State a shot against TCU and beating Texas Tech, Wyatt.
You said so many quality things there, and let's go back, if you don't mind, first of all, to Saturday, to the Texas Tech game. I'm sitting here looking at the box score of the game, and here's the reality. He was just 2 of 8 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3. And yet he was plus 24 on the plus-minus chart. So what does that tell you? Well, exactly what you pointed out. And that is 7 points, but 9 assists, only 1 turnover, 5 steals. And I don't know how many buckets K-State got and actually probably lost a little bit, missing a couple of point-blank shots again. Because of his ability to get the ball to other people. I think as this season has evolved, I think we've seen a lot of things happen, but I think you would agree with me that Marquise, Nigel, and Mark Smith, for the most part, have been the most consistent players from the get-go. I think you could probably throw Selton in there at a level just a little below that, but those 3 guys, they've carried the way, and I think they'll continue to carry the way. Marquise has some abilities that other guys just don't have, and I love watching the guy. Yeah, he'll make an occasional mistake or two, and we've said that all along, but his plus 24 sticks out like a sore thumb.
Marquise Noel, he's listed as 5'8". I mean, I stood next to him. You know, that might be just a hair generous, and all these guys getting haircuts, they're all losing height, which, by the way,
Right.
to bring up the hair for just a moment, which is it's become kind of it's become a team thing. If you ask the team, it was supposed to be started by Mike McGurl, but he was a little bit late, so it was Nigel Pack. Nigel, he's about 3 inches shorter with less hair, and then you have Ish Masood, who got a haircut, basically a buzz cut. He's like 5 or 6 inches shorter now. But Marquise Noel, we know where he's at in stature. He's just barely taller than I am, and people see his height as a disadvantage. I don't, because he can still kind of do whatever he wants with his height. And the thing about small people like myself, we can be sneaky quick. And Marquise Noel is sneaky quick. And I like the word that Chris Lowry, after the end of the game, associate head coach for the Cats, he called him a pest. And he called him one of the biggest pests he's ever coached in his time, not over his 25 years of coaching. But Marquise Noel right now, 11th in the Big 12 in scoring. He is second in the Big 12 in assists. And then also assist to turnover ratio. Marquise Noel is second in the Big 12. So for those that are a little bit of a hater of Marquise when it comes to maybe turn over the basketball a little bit too much, he's second in the Big 12 in assist to turnover ratio. And then in steals, he is first in the Big 12. That was just a monster get for Bruce Weber. What are you most impressed, I would ask, about Marquise Noel's game? Is it his passing, his no-look passing, his ability to shoot the deep three, or I think, in my opinion, what my favorite thing about him is when he kind of just sneaks underneath, steals rebounds or takes away steals, just kind of sneaks in there and takes them?
Well, I'm a big fan of the steals, but I'm also a big fan of the assists. But the steal that he got late in the game against Kevin McCullough, who was as strong as most with the ball, was so impressive. It happened so fast, Mitch, that I thought initially, and our angle wasn't perfect by any stretch. It happened right in front of the tech bench. You probably had a better angle at it than I did.
Right in front of me.
But I thought at first it happened so quickly that they called the foul on Marquise.
Yeah.
No. He stole the ball, and McCullough fouled him heading the other way. And I think there are just so many things to like about Marquise's ability. You can talk about assists, you can talk about steals, but for me, it's what he is capable of in breaking down defenses with the ball in his hands off the bounce. To me, that's what makes him a very special player. Like you, I don't think being short bothers him in any way, shape, or form. I think he is what he is. He's proud of it. It's motivated him to be even a better player. And, for his size, too, he can be. He isn't always, but he can be also a very, very fine defender. And part of that is the steals that go with that. I just think I have to add this, too, though. I don't know that I've seen a newcomer come into a program like he and Mark Smith, who have had that type of experience at a different school or schools, that have wanted to get along and help in any way, shape, or form and lead the way those two guys have. They're different night and day personality-wise in a lot of ways. Neither are really big speakers, but, Mark's a show-by-example kind of guy, and he's just he just shows up and is the same every day. Marquise is probably, I describe him as having a little bit more flair, but it's quiet flair, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I just think both have just done a terrific job.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both of those guys, and I love one thing I was worried about Dejuan Gordon transferring was just that guard that was just going to go try to get every rebound. I loved that out of Dejuan Gordon last year. Mark Smith has been a big surprise, I would say, when it comes to going and getting rebounds. Such a surprise. He leads the Big 12 in rebounding right now. That started last week. He averages 8.3 a game, and he's around everything. That is impressive to me. But to add on top of that, Wyatt, is that Mark Smith is still I would say he is continuing on what he did previously to K-State. He has remained consistent with scoring the basketball at a double-digit clip, 10, 11 points a game. So not only is he averaging those 8 rebounds, he's also scoring in double figures. consistently. That is, I tell you what, Bruce Weber, I think he really did it in the transfer portal this time around, getting those two guys to contribute every single game. They're two of the, like you mentioned earlier, two of the three most consistent guys this year.
One thing that you realize when you watch Mark is there are just some guys that are natural at what they do. I'm sitting here looking at his numbers, and you mentioned the 8+ rebounds a game for the season. In ways, it's almost even more so in conference play. In 5 games, he has 46 rebounds. That's 9.2 a game, and 9 of those are on the offensive end. I don't know what to say about his ability to board the basketball. That would be new and entertaining for your listeners that we haven't already talked about. He's 6'4" and 225. He's really strong. Bruce Weber, before he was losing his voice on the air Saturday, and actually Chris filled in for him for post because he was losing his voice, but he said he's a bull in a china closet, but yet he's a pretty gifted and very strong bull in a china closet for this group. I've enjoyed watching him play.
Speaking with the voice of the Wildcats, Wyatt Thompson. All right, Wyatt, we're about to board a plane to head down to Austin, Texas. A couple of games this week against top 25 opponents, and the first one is tomorrow night, 7:30 tip-off, and it's that dreaded annual Longhorn Network nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
So I can tell you right now there's going to be a lot of Wildcat Nation listening to your call. So I'm sure you've really already started doing a deep dive on what this matchup is all about. Already a rematch of a game just, well, not too long ago. It was the opponent for K-State that they faced the day of the Texas Bowl, and K-State lost by 13, but a 9-point lead in that first half. But coming off that win against Texas Tech, K-State got a little mojo going for them. They got that monkey off their back. What do you see as big factors in this one?
Well, for me, I think you have to go back and remember how shorthanded K-State played, and it was pretty admirable to get out to that first half lead. It was pretty obvious, I think, that it was going to be tough to do that and play that well for 40 minutes, and that turned out to be the case. What I think we're looking at here, Mitch, is a Texas and K-State matchup that will be mostly defensive dominated. It's just kind of the way both of them play. I think it's going to can K-State replicate some of what they did on Saturday, meaning make some threes, but have good ball movement, which they did more consistently in Saturday's game than they've done really in any game this year, maybe aside from segments of the Wichita State game. If they can do that, I think they've got a shot. This Texas team has had their moments, honestly, where they have struggled offensively. I mean, they're 70 points a game. They're okay. But it's not like you're playing Kansas offensively where you have so many weapons. They have a lot of good players, don't misunderstand, but they have not been consistent offensively yet. The question is going to be moving forward, can Coach Beard get them elevated offensively to where they match their defensive intensity? If they do, then look out for that because they've got good players.
And I don't know if you've started really looking into the Kansas Jayhawks again at Texas tomorrow night at 7:30. Yeah. Texas number 23 in the country. Meanwhile, the Kansas Jayhawks are now at number 7 in the new AP poll, with Gonzaga now back up to number 1, and Baylor dropping to number 5. But KU has only got 2 losses on the year, one of them to Texas Tech with a shorthanded Tech, and that was in Lubbock. What is really fascinating to me is actually, if you look at the numbers right now, KU is probably the best offensive team in the Big 12, but defensively they're statistically one of the worst. But maybe I wouldn't read too much into the defensive numbers. They had a toughish non-con schedule. But just your thoughts on the Jayhawks right now.
Well, it's an interesting take, Mitch, because I think you're accurate in that they are a pretty high-level offensive team. I mean, they're averaging almost 82 points a game. That's a lot. And to give you an idea, as I mentioned, Texas is at 70.4, and they're a top 25 type team. The interesting part when you look at Kansas for me is the consistency that they've gotten out of Ochai Agbaji, Christian Brown, and DeJuan Harris, and probably to a lesser degree before he was having some injury issues was Remy Martin. But the scary part is that now Jalen Wilson is back and going. And if you noticed on Saturday, it was West Virginia, and they don't have the bigs that they normally have. but Bill Self had to walk away from that one just giddy over a 19-point, 15-rebound effort from David McCormick.
Mm-hmm.
If he plays like that, KU can beat anybody, any day, anywhere. It's just what it is, because you know what you're going to get out of most of the rest of their guys. It's a really, really good basketball team that shoots the dog out of it. I mean, they're 37% from three, 50% as a team from the floor. Nobody else in the league is doing that. So it's a high level basketball team. But let's hope we see the KU team where McCormick is a little bit off and Jalen Wilson's just okay, and Remy Martin's just okay. I'd take that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
I know I would.
Yeah, absolutely. And after this win of K-State beating Texas Tech at home, a top 25 team, I think just kind of my feeling, just kind of getting the buzz around town that I think you might see a few more people in the Gotta Doom for this KU game now after the Cats pull off that win against Texas Tech. But just a reminder, 7:30 is tip-off at Texas tomorrow. That means pregame starts at 6:30. We will have the game here on K-Man. And then Stan will also have the call for the Sunflower Showdown Part 1, as the Cats will host number 7 Kansas and Bramlage, a 3 o'clock tip-off with pregame at 2. Wyatt, I appreciate your time and safe travels down to Austin, Texas.
Thank you so much. Good to be on with you. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow night. Go Cats. Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it.